Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast, the voice of bodybuilding. I am your host, Sarah Parker, and we are here for a conversation I had. And this was before my mini cut. And I was thinking, I feel like this would be really cool to bring this insight into the podcast and essentially help anyone that struggles around accepting food and also having off plan. And I feel like, there's going to be people that resonate with my own journey, with my own relationship with food, how it's been difficult for me to, accept having things like off plan, be able to be a little bit more open minded in regards to what foods I can have and not essentially that lead to shame, guilt, any of the things that we might feel if we're trying to embrace having different foods, particularly when we're not tracking the foods, because we are absolutely in a space where we are monitoring our nutrition every single day. So when it comes to going for an off-plan meal or having something, it's not always as easy as everyone else finds it. You might see on social media, speak to friends where it's like they don't have a problem having off-plan. And that can be certainly a journey of exploration in yourself as a competitor and as a bodybuilder in itself. And I feel like for sure there's relevance on allowing yourself time in these settings and being able to essentially understand what off plan means to you. Now, the conversation I had was actually with a worker in Sainsbury's. So, Matt and we wanted to have essentially a couple of cookies from the patisserie bakery section in Sainsbury's. And I was like, cool, I've got to a point in off season where I'm absolutely happy to have something like a couple of cookies instead of an off plan sometimes. I really felt like in that 19-week push up, I wasn't really too focused on wanting to have, a load of meals out, as it were. And that's just personal preference. I definitely find that enjoying something like a couple of cookies is nice on top of my normal foods. And I can do that, pre-workout, post-workout. I can do that, enjoy it, enjoy a sweet treat, and crack on with my day. And what I've certainly found is I'm able to have something like that, as I say, on top of my off-season macros and food plan, and that be really nice to experience because I'm not trying to push and pull things all the time and not eat before. And that drives certain thought processes around then having something like a cookie and feeling like, oh my God, I want more. And it almost opening the floodgates. Again, that's something we can work on ourselves. And certainly, I won't delve into it too much, but there can be thought processes around trigger foods. And if you were to have something, would that then lead to you wanting more? That's a personal exploration for you. And it's, of course, understanding that within yourself and what drives these sort of behaviors. Now, we went up to the patisserie counter and it was like, cool, is there any cookies, white chocolate, miso cookies, really, really nice, a nice palate experience, not too heavy. As I say, I can have that pre or post workout, enjoy the baked goods. So there wasn't any out. And there was the lady who works in Sainsbury's in the bakery part, doing her thing. So Matt was like, oh, have you got any of the white chocolate and miso cookies? And she was like, yep, no problem. They're just on the side cooling down. So brought them out. And she was like, oh, are you going to buy all four? And we were like, yep, we're having two each. And she was like, do you know they've got calories in? They're very high calorie. There's a lot of fat in those. And I just had this moment where I was like, one, aren't you meant to be selling me these cookies? And two, obviously they've got calories in. Obviously they have got fat macros in. And it was a bit of a weird exchange because, as I say, she's meant to be sort of promoting that you buy these things. It's a shop, it's a retail shop. And we went and sat and had a coffee. And between purchasing Z cookies and going for the coffee, I was like, do you know what? Actually, and I'm going to play it straight. In the past, for me, that would have fucked with my head. I would have felt shame and guilt. I would have felt that I didn't want to eat the cookies. I would have felt like I'd done something wrong, that I'm not a real bodybuilder. my floodgates would be open to all of these thought processes. Why is someone having to tell me this when I've worked so hard to get to a point where I can have a couple of cookies in an off season, sit and have a coffee, enjoy that as a nice experience? Why has someone had to say something that could potentially have a knock-on effect to how I feel about eating a couple of cookies? And this is where I felt it was such a nice gateway to bringing this to the podcast, because she doesn't know that I have had struggles with food in the past. She doesn't know I'm a competitive bodybuilder. She doesn't know anything about me. And she's essentially given me her opinion, right? She's given me almost advice. I don't know. I wouldn't really call it advice, but she's given me what she's thinking without thinking about it. Now, this translates into the things that we can come across in the bodybuilding space. People saying things before they think, people not understanding our own relationship with food, people feeling like they need to tell you what they're thinking and not realizing there could be a knock on effect for you. And I sat there having the coffee with Matt and I was like, do you know what? I could be someone that is healing from a food disorder. I could be someone that has really bad issues around, tracking, nutrition. I could be someone that doesn't like essentially what could be deemed as conflict, as it were. I could feel very anxious in a social scenario, but that wasn't in her mind. She just imparted this information on us. And I said to Matt, I feel like I could easily not eat these cookies now and my mind could go absolutely haywire because I don't know how many calories are in them. I don't know how many fat macros, carbs, etc. are in them. And that's the whole point for me. That is my own journey with my food relationship. It's something, okay, I know they taste nice. I've had them before. I'm going to enjoy this with a coffee. It's exciting to be able to do that when I haven't been able to do that previously in this mindset. To be able to just have some food off of a menu, have some food like a cookie or two, be able to actually immerse in that without thinking, how many calories has this got in it? Am I okay to have it? Do I need to starve the rest of the day? Da 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 da. You can see how this thought process goes. And it just hit me with how far I've come. So, of course, a reflection on my own growth was very, very nice to feel that. But it brought all of those feelings back when I was imprisoned by these types of thought processes. It's something I've worked so hard on for so many years, and you guys might be listening and you could be in a very similar scenario. And one thing that someone says could throw you back. It could lead to a whole realm of things. Because I've mentioned recently on the podcast and over my years of doing the podcast that the synergy of potential disordered ways of behaving around food, around what we do as bodybuilders, absolutely is there. And it could very closely relate to a food disorder. And then we have people on the outside world not understanding that. And I don't believe, in any way, shape, or form, she was trying to be horrible or make me feel a certain way. She was just like, oh, you're having two. And, just a normal person. But I feel like, guys, it's a moment to remember that we are human and we're all on our own individual journeys with the food side of things. We absolutely are. And when something happens like this, it's okay to be able to process thoughts, to be able to take a moment, and also to be able to talk it through. I sat with Matt and I spoke about all of this. I was like, I need to get this out of my head. And what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to allow myself to slip back into the shame and guilt and feeling bad and over obsessing over the macros. I'm actually going to sit here as planned, have a coffee, and enjoy a couple of cookies. And it for sure, we went for a walk after it was going through my mind, how many people in our space are going to be struggling with things like this? How many of you are at a point where you find it very hard to accept certain foods? You find it hard to actually just go and be present at something like a meal out? Because I know myself, for years, guys, I would sit there at a dinner table, I'd have a menu presented to me, and I'd freak out. I'd be thinking, I don't know what to do. This has got this many calories. What should I choose? Should I have something that hasn't got many calories in it? Because then I'm not gonna, deviate from my macros, even though when we look at off plan, yes, of course, we have guidelines in place a lot of the time, but the whole point is to bring enjoyment, to make memories, to embrace social occasions, to be able to do that and know that we're allowed to do that. Because this is absolutely, when we look at something like off plan, it's such a nice feeling when you can be present, order something you want, and not feel guilt for that. But is that a journey? I believe for a lot of us it is. And the thing is, for me personally, if I was going for an off-plan meal, I'm not going to spank it. I'm not in a position where I want to do that or I need to do that. Again, if you're in a scenario right now where you don't go and have off plan because you're worried about essentially eating more than you're bargaining for, maybe that would lead to overeating, perhaps even binging. Would that open, as I've spoken about, the floodgates into eating and wanting more? And this is where it's super important to reflect on where you're at as an individual and what you want to do with off plan, because sometimes we're told have off plan at least once a week. This is in your plan. But maybe right now it's not the right time for you to have this. Maybe it's like, actually, I just want to cook some food at home and not weigh and measure the food. Or maybe I just want to have a couple of cookies, and enjoy that as part of a day rather than have this like ticking time bomb of on X date at X time, I have to go for this meal with loads of people. I don't want to. I feel pressured. I feel anxious. What do I do? Because we absolutely have a choice and we have a right to acknowledge this within ourselves and give ourselves permission to be able to do what we feel comfortable with. If you do not feel comfortable with going for an off plan meal, then for sure you can still partake in socializing, but perhaps you eat before and you just say, actually, I won't eat. I'd like to come along. And that's important, guys, because we shouldn't be, I believe, pressured into doing things that we don't want to do or the time is not right. Or we can, of course, look at being able to integrate this over time when you are ready to actually opt for restaurants that are a bit more bodybuilder friendly. You can choose foods that digest well. You can choose foods that you like. And always remember you have a right at any dinner table, at any social occasion. You have the right to choose what you eat. This is not about what everyone else feels you should do. And we can often feel this pressure that everyone's like, have this, you should have this. But actually, this is your journey. This is your choice. If there's certain things that you're not comfortable with, I don't want to promote that you just avoid going out the house and don't do any of these things. But I feel like it's important, as with the podcast label, The Voice of Bodybuilding, to remember you have a voice. Now, if this means having difficult conversations with people around you, and being able to take ownership for how you feel, I believe this is a time to promote that, guys. Because however difficult it does feel, if the people around you care about you and you are feeling anxious, if you are feeling pressured, surely they should support that and want to help you rather than push back on it and make you feel even worse. And this is, as I say, your reminder to remember you have a voice and the struggles you have speaking with people around you, whether that be your coach, your friends, the people that are closest to you, does count. It does. This also might be a time where you need to process this yourself. If you're listening, I always, always, always think about this, guys. It's a very intimate exchange when you are listening to one of my episodes. You're listening to the words I say. It's a very, very, what can be intense moment sometimes, or moments over a podcast where you think, whoa, Sarah is speaking to me. She sees me. She's talking about my struggles. You might need to think about this and process this after listening to the podcast. Maybe you need to listen a couple of times. Maybe it's a case of really taking this time to have a moment to go, okay, some of the things that Sarah's spoken about today are things that I want to explore, perhaps work on, perhaps learn on accepting more. But this is individual to you guys. And don't ever forget that. Because if you are struggling around food, You are human and you have feelings. You're not just a bodybuilder, a competitive bodybuilder. You are a person and you do have a voice. And I want to always try and encourage different thought processes that help you understand yourself more and help you on your journey. And of course, if you feel that this episode is appropriate to maybe send to a friend, or you want to reach out and say that it's been, beneficial to listen to my talk today, for sure, I'm absolutely a message away, guys. You know that. And I want to essentially support you as much as humanly possible.